Hello there, and welcome to, another rather strange episode of Weird Music. This is, of course, the show where, that weird presenter, myself, just talks about a different album as and when they can. We try to do every week, but yeah, a little bit of a break we've had here. But anyway, today's episode, we're going to be covering one of my favourite albums that I did actually mention in my list of my top favourite albums of all time. A 1,000 subscriber video special we did about a year ago now. Anyway, this album, this is a very weird existential thing for me, so it's definitely resulted in a very weirdly written review today. But I just have a fascination with this album. It kind of just does everything I'd want in a musical album. It's got this very slow, somber, melancholy atmosphere that permeates throughout all the music, as well as just expressing to us this very peculiar sentiment towards the existential corners of English countrysides. Bit more on that later. There's a fair bit to try and get through this video. It'll be a bit wonky, but I'm going to be trying my best. So today, I present Cold House by Hood. So, of course, let's ask ourselves, who are Hood? Well, Hood are a post-rock alternative rock band from Wetherby, England, formed in 1990 by brothers Chris and Richard Adams, who over the years have had many different friends come and go throughout the various releases under the moniker of Hood. And their music, especially in the later years it seems, kind of turns to the strange, tragic, existential style of pastoral and textural music, kind of drawing, a lot of influence from the likes of Bach's Psychosis and Talk in some regards, especially, in my opinion, Hex by Bach's Psychosis, where there's a lot of texture in the actual instruments and the pacing of it all. It's very fascinating. Especially on this album, though, Cold House, though, the band make, use of a variety of different instruments to expand the sonic palette of the album, with it all coming together to create this very mysterious and cold vibe that permeates throughout the entire thing. To me, lonely, existential, cold music. So, of course, Cold House, the fifth studio album from Hood, released on the 12th of November 2001 by Domino, a British label that has had various divisions in other countries, and whose roster does include many notable bands and artists. And so, apparently from what I've gathered, named after the studio in which this was recorded, Cold House Studios based in Leeds, apparently maybe. But this is just one of the most fascinating works in Hood's whole discography, I feel. 10 or so tracks of this very cold, icy, patient music that actually features a couple of vocal contributions here and there on a couple of tracks from collaborators Doseone and Y, who add this very strange element of hip-hop and rap to some of the tracks here. Good friends of the band, which from my research as well is a very important thing to them, the friendship and community they keep, something that even on this very peculiar album they do manage to express, but more on that later. In any way, this album, very strange experimental post-rock album of sorts, maybe. It's odd because it traverses such a strange, just a range of different styles and influence across these many tracks, delving into some incredibly strange areas of music, However, it's all presented in sort of proto-electronic post-rock style of music that leaves everything in this rather unpredictable place. It's very reminiscent of the kind of approach that Radiohead took to their music when recording Kid A and Amnesiac, I'd say, combining electronic influences with acoustic instrumentation as well, and making albums that didn't really adhere to any specific genre. And this one, you're kind of getting, these rather cautious, faint melodies that are perched upon acoustic instruments from guitars to strings to even brass and woodwind, whilst these, electronic beats just fight against the drum kit from time to time. It creates this very cold, windy album experience, though, that feels like the battling of terrible weather in the corner of an English house, hidden in amongst the fields in the middle of nowhere. The perfect place to go and get lost and mysteriously record music. It's, to me, an incredible album experience that has stuck with me since I first discovered a couple of years back. Icy instrumentals against melancholy lyrics, so let's see what's going on here, shall we? So, our first track, they removed all trace that anything had ever happened here. This is an immediate cold opener, especially with the glide of that guitar, though, accompanied by these electronic beats, that, just sort of establish the tour tempo as that guitar just gets caught in these delay effects, as these gradual swell of strings come in to support it all, establishing that very icy cold place. And I find it, oddly apprehensive though, as it loops over and over for many moments before the drums actually come in, bringing in, basically acting as an incredibly long introduction. Like, it really takes such a long time for this album to sort of get itself going, but in doing so, you get this, as mentioned, a really cold opener of these icy instrumentals, and it slowly establishes the scene though, letting the drums come in to start adding a bit more energy and sort of frenetic pace to it all, still keeping in time with the electronic beats that's still occupying it though, which then paved the way for these odd faint British vocals that climb into the melody in so many odd ways. I have to say, when it comes to the vocal performances on this album, it's something that's really weird to me. They choose to go for these incredibly strange notes, and yet it seems to work so well in terms of what they're trying to do with their music, if that makes sense. Almost like the melodies themselves are just breaking apart under the weight of it all. In any case, it just still establishes that incredibly cold atmosphere though. Very isolated in this frozen landscape that's blurring past before our eyes. Perhaps very reminiscent of its album covers of the latest glimpse of a house just situated in the middle of British fields, perhaps. The faint little corners of England, capturing an instant existential quality that's even represented in the music here, reminiscent of the likes of Radiohead, as I mentioned. Certainly in that corner of alternative music of still sounding experimental. Incredibly cool. In any case though, the song slowly builds up there, but it really enters a very cool bit about 2/3 of the way in, when you suddenly get the appearance of Doseone, who essentially loops over a rap of sorts over the instrumentals essentially, and it creates this very interesting hip-hop vibe that suddenly comes out of nowhere, still sounding very odd and chilling in that very cold space, but it's one that works so well in just presenting the story of this album though. Such an odd, bizarre moment, but something I've come to really appreciate and love after hearing this album for so many times. And it becomes this really cool thing when they just then let the whole thing just ride off into the distance, letting the loops happen, let those instrumentals, those strings, just everything just further continue that very melancholy, tragic landscape. It's an amazing album opener, I think, a perfect way to open this thing with, really taking your time to let everything speak for itself, Brilliant stuff in my opinion, brilliant stuff. We then get the next track though, You Show No Emotion At All. So this one, as you can instantly hear, has this very, experimental electronic beat that plays, very spacey with these sort of keyboards that bounce alongside it. And, it plays this opening around though, and you can kind of just start nodding away to it. It's kind of cool. But then when they start singing, you get that really kind of sad, melancholy vibe once more, even when they bend so oddly on those certain notes in the verses though. They're trying to throw the melody away, only to bring it back in with these lovely guitar parts that just fall straight in line with those continually playing beats. It has to be said here, the way this album is mixed together just is an absolute delight to me. I love how everything comes in and out with all these different kinds of instrumentals and stuff, and I love how it does it on this one though, especially following the verses, following these sort of choral sections, and emphasizing certain words they're saying as well with the introduction of the guitar, for example. It all just helps to push off this incredibly sad, melancholy vibe, and it becomes all the more sad, melancholy for me when you get this repeated chorus line of "I can't stand the thought of you alone." And what's that? They repeat it for a couple of instances, but it then paves the way for this wonderful bass line to just then carry the instrumentals along with it though, and it's when the whole song just seems to open up suddenly much more as well, as the guitars just play these notes, those strings, those electronic beats, everything just comes together so brilliantly here. I think it's a short little phrase, but it's one of my favourite bits in any Hood song, and one of my favourite bits of this album. It of course, fades out to let the vocals come back in to continue the story of the song though, push along that miserable story of existentialism, of course. But it all just results in just one of my favourite songs of this album though. Like, I just love how, it navigates this careful line between electronic and acoustic instrumentation, as I'd say. And it even just still finds new places to go, even as it continues along. Like, we get another verse, another chorus and stuff, but at the end, to close off the thing, you get this wonderful pull on a brass instrument, that just echoes right above in the air alongside everything that we've been hearing. And it just holds on a few of these gentle notes so brilliantly that just mixes in so well with the song. It just is a lovely way for it all to bring itself off to a close, letting it all trail off into the silence, and it becomes easily one of the coolest songs on here, just a brilliant dive into this cold soundscape. Moving along, track 3, another very interesting one here. We get the next track of Branches Bare. So immediately we've got a very different vibe here, of course. You've got this very prominent bass loop that, it seems to just be expanding so wildly on that final note though, as in the background a keyboard plays this very faint melody against this kind of frequency that's there. And it's a very ominous opener that loops over for a couple of moments and stuff, establishing the scene so weirdly, kind of like, Bob Ross landscapes in the rain, perhaps, just the rain of the outdoors kind of thing. Very peculiar, very peculiar. Once it establishes everything, though, you do get the vocals immediately coming in with that weird bend towards odd notes again. But I think it's cool, though, how their songs are presented in this way though, and it all results in these peculiar landscapes in many ways. Like, I don't know why, but this one just had my mind wandering off so wide, like while I was staring out the train window, just looking at the English countryside essentially. But I was reminded kind of the aesthetics of Withnail and I, a brilliant British comedy set in the English countryside, of course. It's, to me, that kind of peculiar aesthetic that I feel like the album is trying to capture, the weird English experience of these small corners of the world found in nowhere in particular, it seems. Just hidden away amongst the fields and the trees and, barely visible as the train just rushes past them all. It certainly feels like, how this, it does feel like this is what the vibe that the album's trying to express to me, and it really comes across as commuting music, I guess, because I've listened to this so much on the train to and from London, of course, and it's perfect to just stare out the window to. A little bit hard to describe, but it's just it just seems to capture that melancholy pondering you get when you just stare out of the train window. Before we finish talking about this one though, I should say about 2/3 of the way though, we actually get another vocal contribution for Doseone though, who gives us this incredibly weird verse that sounds so sonically odd in places. It's very a cool thing that he sings though. It makes for a very nice part of the song where all this occurs, leading into this incredibly strange and abstract imagery that enters this very peculiar observation and statement he makes about sunsets not wanting to be photographed. Cool part of the song. And it leads the way for additional guest vocalist Wyatt to just close off the whole thing with this very hip-hop aesthetic, that reminds me so much of the likes of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, I think. I don't know why, but when you hear his sort of like little rap that he does, that he loops over and over, I'm just imagining, just going up and down half pipes on that kick. Very peculiar, very peculiar. But to me though, it's a very cool thing because it further diversifies, that incredible range of sounds that the whole album expresses, if that makes sense, and styles and stuff, just bringing it all together in this very weird, harmonious way. I think it's one of the weirdest out of all the songs, but I think one of the coolest with what it manages to do with everything, and I really like this one, I have to say. Very peculiar, bringing together all disparate sources, but definitely a highlight on the album for me. Our next song, Enemy of Time, this brings us back to that very chilling, cold aesthetic though, the guitars landing so sadly on these notes found alongside that melody, and it's interesting to me, it's another very slow song that patiently occurs though. But I think it's kind of nice in a weird way though, because I just love how it gently establishes the scene for them to all just start singing this very existential musing for a few phrases. And there is this odd lightness to it, falling more heavily to let this acoustic drone come in midway into the song though, following the chorus again, where they really panically emphasize the final words of it all. And then you just get this very faint drone of what I would assume to be a clarinet. I don't know, it kind of has that sort of what's the word, embouchure they say? I don't know. But it kind of has that sound that reminds me much more of a clarinet than any other brass instrument or wind instrument or anything, but I actually can't find any reference to it, so that would mean it probably isn't, right? But then again, what would it be instead? I don't know, not too sure, I do apologise. But I love that note in this song though, it's a lovely thing that the whole song builds up towards. And they really hold on it so nicely in the final ending of it all, and as a result it's a brilliant thing though, especially actually towards the end as well. You even get this very odd sort of piano playing these very hard hitting notes though, and it mixes in so well to the song once again though, and it creates this really sad soundscape that just sort of gets you to hang your head low and probably prepare you for the next coming track, I would say. Speaking of the next track, The Winter Hit Hard. So this one opens with a rattling of lowercase electronics, it feels, and delayed guitars ringing out so sparsely along the swell of brass maybe, and it calls into view the distant countryside spotted briefly out of those windows on trains, like the movement of the train pulling you past those small vignettes that your imagination wanders off to. For me, this one is such a sparse melody, taking such an incredibly long time to bring in the vocals that seem to just sort of zap in from some distant kind of echo towards the mix before briefly being thrown back away and back in forward, and it creates this very sort of weird electronic experience of sorts. It pulls the whole song into this section though that then gets pushed along by this actual drum pattern from the drummer though, and it becomes this incredibly sad, accidentally sad part of it though. It just starts to get really tragic as all the instruments just seem to just fall so heavily on these notes though, the pull of a brass, the guitar lines, the sparseness of it all. And for me, it just really captures that consideration of the very glimpses of places that exist out there that we all chance upon on our journeys on trains, the hidden corners out in those fields. And for me, I think this is one of my favourite parts of the whole album, as it all builds so sonically with all of these different instruments, acoustics, electronics, drums of a very strange nature, echoing in the distance so oddly at times, just tapping away and just going bum, 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 like that. It's, oh man, the mixing is amazing on this one. And it all just builds to this amazing refrain that they just cry out of just how hard the year's been. My goodness, it feels so real when he just calls that out in the lyrics though. You just, for me, I just really buy into just how he says it, and you really believe that the year has been hard, that it's been so difficult and stuff. And damn, when I was listening to this one while I was reviewing, I was really lost in this one, and I was just thinking, I really hope he's feeling better these days, because my goodness, it's weird because I adore this line in the song. It's one of my favourite moments, but it's a gut puncher for me, and I think lyrically, it's just one of my favourite things I've heard in music now. That final verse, just comes across as this amazing existential dread perhaps, and it just brings together this whole cataclysm mix of instrumentals. And it's very interesting because it's hard for me to explain. I just get so lost in this one. I just really get lost in that existential nature that it gives me, because I'm just there, like, just reflecting on myself, my own year, how difficult things have been, how cold the landscape is, and things like that. And as a result, this is one of my favourite songs. I like a lot of them, but this one just rings so particularly true on this amazing existential level that I appreciate. I guess actually it's probably why this is one of my favourite albums of all time, though. And I just. It's interesting, like, I wish I could remember how I came across this album. Like, it was when I was writing this I realised I don't remember when I first heard this album, like, how I first came across it. I remember first hearing it, to be fair. I remember being weirded out by certain albums, like, this is very strange but very cool, and over the years, the more I've listened to it, the more everything falls into place and makes sense to me. And yeah, this song just gets me every single time now. Like, it just really it's just one of those things that I just seem to be able to connect to on that emotional level, and yeah, very interesting, very interesting. Let's move along though. I could be here forever talking about how much I love this song. So the next song of I Can't Find My Brittle You. So this one is where they change the vibe up entirely, suddenly bringing in a bit of fuzz into the guitar as it loudly plays away, on these different notes though, Very intense sounding, coming across very urgent as it quickly brings in these vocals that do some of the same stuff the previous songs of sorts, but it's sounding a lot more frenetic almost, especially in the mix of those instrumentals, Very odd sounding. But of course, all part of that weird vibe that the whole album's presenting to us. Like, this one for me, it's kind of oddly punk in places maybe, especially with those drums that do these weird fills in all over the place, and the sort of urgency of the guitar, the urgency of the bass as well, and the urgency of their vocal delivery perhaps. And to me, it kind of feels like quite a considerable bombardment following the previous tracks in terms of how much heavier it all is, arguably. But I like the way they do it all, though, just letting it go to this really odd point before you go into this like Aphex Twin breakdown of electronics and beats towards the end to just close off the whole thing in this cataclysmic overload. Like, it's a sudden moment, very in your face, but it's a very cool song that pops up here. The next track, This Is What We Do to Sellouts. So, a bit more Aphex Twin here, maybe. This is the most experimental of all the tracks, I would argue, because you get this very odd pattern of electronics that sound nothing like the rest of the album here. And you wonder, where this whole part is headed, arguably, even what they're trying to do here, before after a very long introduction of these like electronic blips and glitches and beeps, you kind of get this glide of light guitar that ends up finding the vocal melody hidden in that maze of electronics. It's so peculiar, and it's kind of not like any electronic song, not like any alternative rock song I've heard, and it's so weird as a result. Like, so many of the electronic elements occur like, the slightly glitchy, faltering IDM music that pulls together various semblances of post-rock, perhaps, when it does introduce the song finally. And that odd combination of this futuristic aesthetic on normality of regular instruments, perhaps it's so bizarre and such a melon twister to think about, but I think it's really cool sounding, and I love how it all just comes together brilliantly on this album, just this nicely mixed together, creates this very lush listening experience that navigates both the coolest and the awkwardest of moments in music. And it feels like this one happens so briefly as well, like it just seems to be there and then it's gone moment. And a faint little moments of experimental electronica hidden amongst this very strange album. Super cool, super cool. Speaking of experimental songs, the next track of The River Curls Round. So this one opens with a sort of loop of acoustic guitars bled through various reversing effects, it feels, as it pulls right back around again, sort of creating this sort of cycling quality almost, or that flowing quality you get in the rivers perhaps. But you get a lot of interference and glitching from the more electronic elements that create this sense of uncertainty, anxiety almost. And just this odd myriad of notes that rattle the vocals in these very unusual electronic effects. It kind of creates this awareness of how all instances of sound seem to be getting hidden by the briefest of moments of abstraction almost, hidden in amongst this echoing effect of instrumentals. Very cool, but once again, I love it when the brass manages to find this very faint little melody hidden right in the background amongst all those delay effects, all of those loops, all of those sounds all occurring in their own way. Like, it's so weird, and everything that happens and you hear on this one feels so sporadic, almost. Very strange instrumentals that feel like kind of like an odd throw down of a motif, down experimental avenues of loops and echoes almost. It's so weird to describe, but it's such an interesting one how they present this one here. Yes, of course. It's very strange, but like it's very sonically interesting for me. This music experience, very cool, and perhaps another favorite of mine across this album. I feel like a lot of the songs are my favorite, all for their own different reasons. Perhaps so it's kind of cheating, but it's very strange to. I do like it. It's strange to know exactly what's going on here, and that's what I kind of like, though. This sense of experimental expression that's not adhering to genre, but utilizing bits here, bits there from so many different things to make this musical experience. It's amazing to me. It's amazing. So, the penultimate track on this album, Lines Low to Frozen Ground. So I think if any of the songs on this album capture a semblance of jazz, this might be the one that does it the most prominently, I feel. Especially with the interplay between the cymbals and the bass on this one, like you get this really chilled out jazzy vibe to this one as the guitar continues that sparse journey of melancholy wandering, perhaps, letting the vocals fall so gently into the mix, like looking out the window of the moving train, just watching the whole world slowly move past, piece by piece, place by place. That kind of slow momentum movement that the song carries itself along with. And like one of my favourite things on this album, so oddly minimalist, so faint and so barely occurring, like those echoes you see from beyond the hills that continually rains all around you. So alike in that momentum that trains give when you're staring out the window and watching the world just move past at its very slow pace. I think it's a very cool song, and it's such a highlight on this album, especially with how the whole thing just comes together sonically. Like, I love how you get these very faint vocal drones of oohs and ahs that sound so lovely with that mix of instrumentals they do, just really capturing that state of existentialism, I feel. Like, just a lovely highlight on this album that's still presenting no particular consideration to those quiet corners of the English countryside, of course, but it sounds wonderfully jazzy as well, like, just very bluesy almost in a weird way. Perhaps further pushing, that sort of variation of so many song styles, in terms of branching out the alternative post-rock with so many different things, if that makes sense. But yeah, just a favourite melody of mine on this one, It's such a favourite melancholic expression, that sense of just wallowing in it all, just wallowing in that sort of feeling as everything just pushes past. However, we do get one more song in here. To close off the final thing, we get the final song of You're Worth the Whole World. And I think this is, without a doubt, one of my favourite ending songs to any album I have ever heard, I think. Like, you get a kind of gentle acoustic melody playing the opening, introducing the way for one final appearance from Doseone, singing this incredibly strange verses that feel, oddly kind of like performance art-esque in terms of their levels of expression and performance that he gives to it. But it's very cool, as in the background, you've got the band singing, the lyrics as well, in this incredibly deadpan way, and creating this very odd dueling occurrence of vocals that are kind of colliding together against the instrumentals, especially when that sort of beat is coming in and out of it all, starting, and it just creates this wonderful sense of existentialism, like a final scene. A final goodbye from the band for this album, where they give us this song that feels like a beautiful celebration of community that one feels when they're connected to people, which to me I interpret to be the way Hood feel connected to their friendship, with everyone involved in this album, from the band members to the guest vocalists of Doseone and Y, to the producers, to everyone involved here. This lovely, charming, friendly, experimental track that highlights, so many lovely instrumentals as well of woodwind and, brass, of course, and it's just one of the best notions on the album, though. It's difficult to explain, but they abstractly sing, presenting their lyrics, this sort of very strange imagery, but it just seems to just capture that sense of of just the love you feel in a community of people, that of your peers that you share with you, of course, having your like-minded people that you share your time with, like those that you keep around with your life, that they fill your life with a sense of love and understanding, and those that make it wholesome and worth it, I feel, which I think is echoed so beautifully in the final sentiment of the album, where they process the vocals to hell, but they essentially express this notion, what I think they're saying is, I feel so loved, and my goodness, I think it's one of the most beautiful things. Like, I love how the entire album journey has been one that's so cold, so icy, and at the end of it all, they found time to express appreciation for their friends, express appreciation for the love they feel for each other, and I think it's beautiful. Like, it kind of gets to me in a way, like in this kind of emotional way. Like, there's something that just feels, it's weird, it's so existentially considerate, you know, something, you know, that's taken on this sonic unusual journey, you know, of instrumentals and vocals before landing in the final words to, you know, to carry it all along, essentially. It's so cool, like, you know, especially the way this song presents itself, you know, it's kind of oddly glorious. It still kind of feels a bit sparse in places, especially with the experimentation of it all, but then it closes everything off so perfectly, I feel, and I can't help just feel very warm after everything, though. Like, it's one of the coolest final little nods to have in the album, hidden right at the end there, to leave everything so nice, so charming, and so full of this amusing sense of bewilderment and existentialism. Like, brilliant stuff, and one of my favourite things off this album. And so with that, yeah, we have essentially covered Hood's Cold House here. Yeah, very weird review, like, this one came out so weirdly, but I really have wanted to try and talk about it for such a long time, you know. It's just one of my favourite albums and one of my favourite experiences in music, you know, something that just captures the sense of everything I enjoy in the making of music, you know, capturing it in this very unusual cold presentation, of course. I think it's brilliant and cool, though, how and the journey that you get from this, capturing such moments of melancholy in amongst this myriad of genres that it all navigates, you know, a train journey into the very kind of, you know, strange series of daydreams and thoughts that you end up. Like, it's everything I like in music, you know. You know, everything from its aesthetics to its themes to its instrumentals, its performances, the lyrics that ring really true at times to me as well, and its very lonely, despairing aesthetic that's navigated across this wonderful palette of musical genres and instruments all coming together in this beautifully harmonious way. I think it's one of my favourite things I've ever had the fortune to come across, and something I have listened to so much since my discovery of it, whenever the hell that was. And it's an album that has, as you no doubt know, accompanied my journeys on the train so many times. Like, there is something to be said about staring out the window, listening to this kind of music. Like, it is just an experience every single time. And, you know, it's odd because I can't exactly place what it is they're doing half the time in terms of, like, the music they make and what they're doing. Like, very Radiohead-esque approach to the mixing of instrumentals and their approach to combining genres. But that's what I love. Like, I love that sense of experimentation, of using what's available in sound to create something that sounds so starkly different as a result, and yet full of these very strange echoes regarding these faraway buildings hidden amongst the fields. Yeah, one of my favourite albums, of course. You know, I'm glad to finally finish the time to talk about this beyond the favourite albums list. Like, it's difficult to put into words this existential experience I hold with this, you know, especially when trying to write down and review this, just literally being on the train itself, staring out the window and just getting lost in the music. It was very difficult to word it all, but it's part of my experience of music. Like, this album does just pull me into that, very naturally into that state of existentialism, but that is just something I seem to completely identify with, if that makes sense, you know. Especially here, you know, the music having that really sad, melancholy aesthetic of presenting the rain and the cold and the feeling of loneliness and loss almost in these cold corners of England. Like, it's something that just communicates very effectively with me, and I just adore it for that reason. Like, it is just one of my favourite things to listen to, I think. And so I think with that, yeah, we'll just come to the end of our episode of Weird Music there. Glad to have finally talked about Hood's Cold House here. You know, such a weird navigation of genres and styles into its esoteric expression of existentialism, of course. Something that I just love listening to time and time again. Just, for me, capturing that British sense of existence, you know, just, you know, that I think a lot of us can probably identify with as well, maybe? Maybe, anyway. But the way they've just captured and presented their story with ideas so effortlessly and so wonderfully, and with so much experimentation at times, and making it, you know, arguably oddly unclassifiable, right? And it kind of reminds me of a lot of things as different things at once there, and it feels like this sort of, you know, tonal force that just presents their music so tragically that it doesn't really matter what it's reminding me of. It's just like their own thing entirely. Yep, one of my favourites. So if you've been watching this far, I would like to thank you for watching this very strange episode of Weird Music there. Not sure how this one's going to turn out, but we will see. We will see. I hope you have enjoyed whatever this is. But for now, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.